Sorry, Mr. Street.
Did you ever look at someone else and think if only you had their life, you'd have it all?
Look at how cool this is. Signed by all 5 band members.
A soul of Detroit.
You know what the sickest thing is about you,
Shawn?
You fantasize about being
ML Elric.
singing somebody else's songs. Oh, maybe if I get really lucky, I'll get to grow up and listen to Air Supply.
You asked her to ride your finger out of my face. It's gone.
What are you doing? Come on. That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You might be qualified, ML.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now, Albert?
I think that little bit of production cut off just before Mark Wahlberg's movie Brothers says, "What's wrong with Air Supply?"
My mom's favorite band.
Where do we start with that one? I think we just leave that one on the table. And I've never seen Rockstar, but I love that his brother was Adam Sandler's rival in The Wedding Singer with the greatest line ever. He's like, "Glenn Guglia." That's funny. What's funny about it? It's like, never mind. But hey, kids, it is your old pal ML Elric here with a very special guest who is a rock star, was a rock star, and has some mixed feelings about that. He has played a role in the fate of this show. He doesn't know that, but we're about to explain that because a couple of years ago, well, maybe 5 years ago now, when I was a reporter at Fox 2 and this show was just launching, we had an episode about our guilty pleasures. And I've always been known as kind of a new wave guy, and my brother was a hard rock guy. In fact, I'm going to tell our guest what they have in common, which is another weird little story. But I always used to tease my brother for being big on Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and all this other stuff.
Nice.
But my guilty pleasure...
I knew I liked your brother more.
Well, you know, he is the more talented one.
Not your guilty pleasure, your pleasure.
Well, it was both a guilty pleasure and a pleasure because I think my brother would have said, wait a minute, you gave me a hard time about my music all the time, but my guilty pleasure was Canadian metal. And of course, there's nobody better in Canadian metal, or for my money, metal in general, than Triumph. And of course, I love Rush too, but I never put them in the metal category. So after that episode aired, some of our other guilty pleasures, I think, upset my bosses at Fox 2, and this show was put on hiatus, and I subsequently left Fox 2 for creative differences. We
were suspended because of Triumph.
We were suspended because of Triumph. So we've brought on a gentleman,
which is very rock and roll.
Yes, we brought on a gentleman to atone for his unknown sins, and that is Rik Emmett of Triumph, who joins us to talk about his new biography, to talk about, well, more than just Triumph, but life in general, because it's the kind of rock biography that you haven't seen before. Most of them start with the tales of destruction, depravity, and everything else. You're 78 pages into this book before the word Triumph almost gets more than a passing reference. It's a very deep book. It's a very thoughtful book. It's a very introspective book. And all this conversation is brought to you by Luke Nowacki of Pinnacle Wealth Strategies, who will help you set up a good retirement so that if you want to have a room full of guitars like Rik Emmett.
Oh my God, I know that room. Wow.
You can do that. If you want to live like a rock star in your retirement, Luke will help make that happen. We're also brought to you by the Michigan Peddler. Summer's over, but the fall fun is still going. So if you want to hit a pedal bar in downtown Detroit, Corktown, and Midtown, check out Michigan Peddler. We'll tell you how to get some free swag by hooking up with them. And of course, the Caju Cafe, where live music, great times, great food are always the law. So you have to check out the Caju Cafe. And we'll tell you what's going on there later in our new music segment, or our new wave music segment. And this week's new wave music song, once again, we're going to blame Rik Emmett for this, is a song that he references in his book, one of his favorite pieces of music, as a matter of fact. So that's quite a buildup, and we've made him wait a long time. But Rik Emmett is someone who, I guess you could say, fights a good fight, but his book is called Lay It on the Line. It is a great read, a backstage pass to rockstar adventure, conflict, and of course, triumph. Rik, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's nice to be here and we get a chance to talk to you boys. Detroit boys. Yeah. It's all good.
Well, Rik has a lot of connections to Detroit. For those of you who didn't know it, when he lists in the book some of his favorite gigs, he lists Cobo Hall and Joe Louis Arena. A couple other connections there. He's a big fan of Kenny Burrell, and if you don't know anything about jazz, Kenny Burrell is one of the great guitar players in all of jazz. He's a Detroit guy, and when you listen to all that crap that they put on the radio at Christmas, my favorite things...
What? What are you, anti-Christmas?
Well, no, I mean, it's the same old stuff over and over again. Wait a minute, that sounds like a Triumph lyric. But Kenny Burrell does a Christmas tune. My favorite things from The Sound of Music, whatever. It's one of the most beautiful things you'll ever hear over the Christmas holidays. Unfortunately, you won't hear it on commercial radio. One last connection to Michigan between Rik. His son played baseball for Central Michigan University, and he sang the anthem before Central's game at Comerica Park against what he calls in the book the University of Michigan Spartans. Now, I'm a Michigan State Spartan, and Marc is a Michigan Wolverine, so we may need to chew on that.
He
one
combined best of both worlds.
I'd like to think of it that way too. So a lot of cross-border pollination here with Rik, and
before the show, speaking of places that you've played, Rik, we were talking about Harpo's. Like, what stands out to you about Harpo's on the east side of Detroit? Because that was a wild venue.
It was. I remember you had to get an escort to bring you from the parking lot. Like, you had to let them know, yeah, we're in the parking lot. And they would send out sort of guys to, walk in and yeah, it was wild.
It was dangerous.
I remember the dressing room there was kind of like it was upstairs, behind the stage, kind of, so that when you were coming on stage, you came down this sort of fire escape towards the stage. And that was like after I'd left Triumph, I would come back to Detroit. Like Triumph had always been very big there. So there would always be offers for gigs, and Harpo's was one. I played summertime things too. I played an outdoor thing once. Like kind of right downtown, right by the river.
Okay.
It was like a city square kind of a thing. And a guy got stabbed right in front of the stage and got murdered, like literally got murdered at my gig. And they brought the body back into the green room. So, here were the bands. And it was like one of those things where there's bands all day,
Yeah.
And and so there was bands that had already played and bands that were going to go on after me, and then my band. And we're standing around, and they literally they brought this bleeding body into this, and we're going like, okay, this is
rock and roll.
A little bit strange. This is weird. Anyhow, yeah, what's a weird thing about Detroit too? Like we went, as I said, you mentioned we played. It was the Royal Oak was the first place we played in Detroit. Then we played Cobo. Then we played Joe Louis, and Joe Louis, they knocked it down. Like we were one of the first bands that ever played the hockey rink, and now they've torn it down and built another one. And you go, okay, I must be getting old.
Yeah, now it's apartment buildings.
Yeah, no. Well, I think you reference this in the book. Is the bands come and go, but the millionaires still own the venues, and whatever's been playing there for the people who own them, it's just another paycheck, another night. And that's what happened with Joe Louis Arena. The billionaires who own the hockey team figured they could squeeze a few more shekels out of the punters if they moved them down the street and built their own place, which Little Caesars Arena is a nice venue. And unlike Joe Louis, they actually planned what they were going to do. Joe Louis had a funny story where the mayor of Detroit just threw it up almost overnight because he was afraid the Red Wings were going to move to the suburbs. So it was very hastily assembled. But, when you tell me these stories about your gigs in Detroit, my reaction is only one guy got killed. I mean, it sounds like a pretty good night.
Yeah. Well, I would like to think when the band finally did get on, we killed. We were great. But, yeah. The other thing about Detroit, of course, is that it's right across from Windsor, which is, when Journey sings about South Detroit, they're talking about Windsor.
Exactly.
So there's a really strong Canadian. You mentioned about my kid playing, for Central Michigan for the Chippewas, but there's always been a very strong connection between Southern Ontario and Michigan. So I do think. Well, here's another one. When Triumph was, I think it was the Thunder 7 tour. before we would go out, we would rent a hockey rink and use it to set up the production and rehearse for about a week with all of the production guys. And we did that in Kalamazoo at Wings Stadium. So, it was close, and it was kind of slightly more big leagues than maybe, the sticks of Ontario. If you went into the sticks of Michigan, you felt like you were kind of, we're moving up. And we shot a TV commercial in that stadium for Pepsi, because we had a Pepsi tour sponsorship. So,
well, if you'd played in Windsor Arena, I think the roof would have come down. That was really an old barn over there. So we're glad you played it safe. Although Wings Arena is probably getting pretty old out there in Kalamazoo now too. Did you guys? Would this have been before the big craft beer phenomenon happened? Because Kalamazoo is kind of the place where craft beer really started with Bell's Brewery, and they became a really, really big deal.
Yeah, it would have been 85,
Okay.
so I don't know, because I don't really know about the craft beer thing, but I don't know. I remember, there's a thing that exists sort of in Canadian culture where, you go to Michigan because you might want to go catch a Lugnuts game. You know what I mean? Like, there's a thing about Michigan. Lots of folks have cottages that are on the Lake Michigan shoreline. Canadian folks, but then of course the Michigan folks come on over and they've got cottages in Canada, on Lake Huron and stuff. So I don't know. I mean, it was always just a cool place to go. And when I went solo, I would go up and play gigs up in the peninsula, and there would be guys at my gigs wearing T-shirts that said, like, God and guns. You go, okay.
Yeah, God, guns, and guts, the 3 G's that made America great. You see that a lot when you get north of Detroit. It's yeah.
Rick, it's really interesting because I was reading that, because you just said you don't know about the craft beer because you were never in it for the sex and the drugs, just the rock and roll. I mean, you are a straight up musician, and Gil and Mike were about the whole, presentation with Triumph. But were they partiers, or were people like, come on, man, were you ever pressured to be the rock star partier?
Well, I mean, it was always there, and there's stories that I can tell. Part of it is, when you decide you're going to sit down and write a memoir, that becomes one of the things, like, how much do I want to talk out of school? How much do I, how much am I going to betray the, the blue line, or the, what happens in the dressing room stays in the dressing room, all of those kinds of things. And it's not like I'm Lily White, I had my time, and I was still, smoking a lot of dope when I was in Triumph in the early stages. But by the time I was about 25 or 26, it wasn't fun anymore. I would get paranoid, and I would be sitting there going, "Oh, geez, I think I'm getting a tumor." So I decided I wasn't going to do it anymore. And of course, as soon as I did that, my singing improved anyways. It made it easier to be doing gigs night after night and staying in health, which, being a rock star is very much like being a pro athlete, because you got to be able to get up on stage and bring it night after night after night, So that was the challenge of it. So, but that's not to say that, I mean, there's a story where shall I name names? I'll name names.
Yes.
Who cares? We're playing a tour in Texas where we're flip-flopping, headlining with a band called UFO. And there's a bass player in the band called Pete Way. And I've never met the guys in the band, but the first time we're playing a gig, he walks out onto the arena floor, and he's with, he's kind of typical rock star, big, tall, skinny dude. And he's got a model for a girlfriend, she's a big, tall, skinny thing. And they come walking towards me, and we're going to shake hands and say hi. And the first thing out of his mouth is, "Yeah, man, you got any toot?" The guy's looking for blow, And for those guys in that band, the idea of being on the road was like this traveling circus. And I say this because the singer, I think his name was Phil Mogg, literally later that night, or maybe the next night, he launched himself off of a balcony because the police had been called because their party had gotten out of hand. And so he saw the police coming, and he decided he was going to attack them. Jumps off the balcony, lands on. Well, they just get out of the way and let him, balance upon the tarmac. And so he has to show he's in casts. He's got one on his arm, he's got one on his foot. And you go, oh, geez, what happened, man? But I was not one of those kind of reckless rock stars. I did see them. I have plenty of stories about that kind of stuff, but it didn't really happen to me.
Well, I was watching because you guys put out a DVD. Triumph put out a DVD of the US Festival, and I find the US Festival fascinating in so many ways. I think it's kind of a forgotten festival, and you guys played on Heavy Metal Day, which talk about partiers. I mean, you had Van Halen, Ozzy, Priest, Motley Crue, and it's just crazy watching that crowd and the mass of humanity. Do you go back and watch that? Do you like to relive that? I mean, that's pretty wild. I mean, that's a pinnacle.
Yeah, I'm not really I'm not wired to be somebody that goes back to the past very much. Obviously, when you're putting out a memoir, and now you're doing the round of interviews, and Triumph puts out these, documentaries and things, yes, festival on vinyl, all of these kinds of things. So you can't help it. You're going to get dragged into it. And I'm not going to deny certain things. Like when in the intro, you were talking about, was a rock star. Once a rock star, always a rock star. You can't really ever get away from the fact that there were these things that happened in your life, and they're kind of larger than life. And they're going to stay with you. They're going to be the things that in your obituary, it'll be, Rik Emmett, he was this guy in Triumph, and Triumph, and then maybe their sterling moment was this day at the US Festival in 1983. Now, it's not like, and it's weird to do the rounds of interviews now for a memoir, because one of the surreal things about it is it's almost like you're talking to folks and they're going, yeah, so this is a great wake, Rik, and you had a great life. And you go, wait, not dead yet. Still have other chapters of my life ahead of me that, I'm just having to do this because it's kind of something that the market is so used to, the monetization of the past and looking back. But having said all that, 83, the Memorial Day weekend, it was something. And being on that bill, it was pretty crazy. And it was one of the big memories for me is it was this incredibly hot day. Mm-hmm. Really, the dust in the air was bad. There was a lot of particulate in the air. I think the Santa Anas were blowing it in a certain way. Plus, it was a dusty thing, and so the dust from the venue itself, from the location, was kind of floating around the air. Because who thought they were going to put anywhere from 250 to 400,000 folks in one place at one time? So the place was nuts. But you got up on stage and you ran around for a bit, and oh my God, it was so tiring and so hot. And then I was thinking about, there was Judas Priest in their leathers and their studs and their jackets and their helmets and riding their motorcycles up onto the stage. And I thought, hey, that's a hot day's work. I'm not sure I would want to have to necessarily do that for a living. I'm glad I can get up here in a track shirt.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to launder those leather suits either after that. I mean, I don't know if they ever properly get a chance to dry. I saw the Romantics one time, the lead singer at some gig in Detroit, and I said, when I was a kid, I heard when you guys toured in those red leather tuxedos every week or every night, you wore them every night. And I said, anybody who's ever played hockey knows hockey gloves take a while to dry out. When they dry out, they don't really smell too good. I said, what was it like in those suits? He's like, yeah, we did it. It's like, well, he didn't really want to talk, but I don't think it was a very pleasant memory. But you're right in the book, Rik. Vice just seemed like too much work, too much stress for too little reward, and too much threat of damage to myself and the people I cared about. The high road wasn't the shortcut, but it seemed simpler, cleaner, better lit. Always the more normal, natural choice for me. And you're someone who married a woman who you met when you were in high school, and are still married today. And you mentioned the US Festival, there's some big crazy backstage party, and you just avoided it. Was there ever times when you said, well, let me stick my toe in the pool, and you said, this isn't for me, or holy smokes, this, when I go into casinos, I'm like, I don't stay very long because I'm afraid I'll never leave if I have too much fun.
Yeah.
What happened at moments like that? There must have been times when someone said, "Come on, Rik, let's go. Great gig. Let's hang out afterwards."
Yeah, it happened, and I'm not going to deny that I didn't, try things but I would try them and then go, yeah, that wasn't much fun. And I think the thing to understand too, and of course, the writing of a memoir leads you to self-realization. So that thing that you read, which, thank you for reading that. And I go, oh yeah, that was pretty good. That was some insight there. One of the other chunks of insight about me is that I was a kind of a jock with a jock mentality when I was in high school, and even before high school. I ran track, I played baseball. In high school I played on the football team, and I was kind of like a star because I was really fast. So I had that kind of Rocket Ishmael kind of gift when I was 14, 15, 16. They're starting to catch up to me. 17, they're breaking my legs, and like literally my ACL got torn, and that was kind of the end of that dream. But I always had that joy of play, which is to say that in the moment, and I talk about this in the book. The ball gets hit up into the sky, and you're running, trying to time it so that when that ball comes down, it's going to come down into your glove. And there's going to be this incredibly satisfying feeling, which is like poetry of the moment. And that was the thing that I loved about music, that it had poetry in every moment, or at least the potential for it. And I loved the feeling of chasing that, of being in pursuit of that. And so drugs and extracurricular activities and stuff, that always felt like it was kind of getting in the way of this much more spiritual pursuit, where your body had to kind of be an instrument for that kind of spiritual pursuit. If you decided, yeah, I'm going to get hammered, I'm going to do 8 or 9 lines of blow. Oh, then I'm going to need to drink some alcohol to try and bring me back down. I could look around me and I could witness this firsthand, and I would go, yeah, that's not for me. I'm going back to the hotel. I'm going to have a cup of herbal tea, and I'm going to get a good night's sleep, because tomorrow I want to be able to get up there and I want to be able to chase it. And I think, obviously there were Triumph fans that would come to the band because they would go, it's the best show I ever saw. It's incredible. They got lights that move and lasers and flash pots, and they got flamethrowers, and oh my God, it's unbelievable. But I do think that there were a lot of people that came and said, hey, when Rik Emmett does his guitar solo, it's like it's a really cool moment where, the show settles down and it's just this guy doing his thing, and that was the moment I lived for.
Well, we got a lot of fans checking in. Debbie Michele says, hi, Rik. Frank Clemenson from Windsor, regular listener, says, hey, how's it going? He's joining us from South Detroit. Your music, unlike a lot of metal at the time, had a spirituality to it. And one of the things that I really liked about it, and when we talked about it on this show a couple of years ago, I read some of the lyrics. I won't try and sing them this time, although I know Shawn's going to be very disappointed.
You definitely are going to have to sing
I
them.
do not have that register, but...
you can do it.
But, lines that you have, like, I don't ask for much, the truth will do just fine. I think of that all the time. I think that we have these expectations of people, and we want them to do things for us, or we think they expect things of us. And a line like that just resonates with me because it's just a fundamental thing, right? I mean, whatever you can and can't do, just be straight with me. And where did you find this? Were these truths that had been resonating in your head, or was it just an inspiration because it's a moment of genius that just like a tuning fork, it just kind of keeps ringing?
Wow. Well, that's nice. You put that in a really nice way. I honestly, I taught songwriting at the college level for a long time. And, the great songwriters will all admit there's a kind of a mystery to it, like you pursue it, and like Leonard Cohen would say something like, hey, if I knew where the great songs were, don't you think I'd go there more often? Like, it's hard, and it's a grind to find your way to those things. But part of it too is it's just like anything, you have to fail in order to finally have those moments where you succeed. And here we are, it's October, and baseball playoffs are going on, and I'm a big baseball guy, and I used to tell my students, I used to teach music business, and this was a core thing. I would say, look, you want a secret of life? Here's a secret of life. Ty Cobb was the greatest hitter in all of Major League Baseball history, and his lifetime batting average was .366, So .367, I would say this is like, that is a secret of life. He was the greatest of all time, and he failed more than 6 times out of 10. Like, you're gonna fail, and it becomes a question of how do you cope with failure? How do you deal with that? And how do you bounce back from it? Like that old thing of you get knocked down, you get back up. And then what have you learned from getting knocked down? So Lay It on the Line was the third Triumph album, that lyric that you quoted. And, I've written songs before, lots and lots of songs, but that one was one where I think, and especially that album, that Just a Game album, it was 1979, I was starting to figure out, how do you combine the things of being like a singer and a guitarist and a songwriter and the opportunity you're getting to be a recording artist, which that was a whole other level of making records that radio would play. And then this whole idea of a message and, let's call it, say, a diamond, right? Human beings move mountains and mountains of slag in order to get to this tiny, pressurized carbon. And in a song, that's kind of what you're hoping for, this spotlight moment where something is going to hit somebody and resonate with them. So that idea about truth, I think it was, I'm looking back on it now, I realize it was an intuitive thing, but I was realizing the band calls itself Triumph. Triumph of what? And if I'm going to contribute to this band's success, my songs and my creative thing, it's got to reinforce, the brand, and nobody thought like that in those days. It was just, you were kind of feeling your way towards it, working your way towards it. But that idea of like a virtue, like truth and telling truth and being honest, which was a little ironic, of course, because we were a band of masks and giant production and things to hide behind. But nevertheless, the song was saying, "Hey, just give me the truth. That'll work. That'll suit me." And I think that resonates with folks because it takes all of the noise of life, all of the traffic, and all of the hardship of it, and it just kind of boils it down to a simple truth that you go, "Yeah, that would work." Now, where does that come from? I went to a lot of church when I was a little kid, so my mom would drag me off and I sang in the choir and there was all of that. So music to me was about hymns and anthems. And they always had this, kind of spiritual heart to them. And even though later in my life, I wasn't really much about organized religion anymore and the idea of God and afterlife and that sort of thing, I still believed in that very humanist thing of, this is why I'm here. This is what I should be pursuing. This is what I should be offering to folks. I'm not going to ram it down their throat, but if they like it, great.
Let me just ask, how did you get started, Rik? How'd you guys find each other? I mean, you went from baseball, running track, to touring stadiums around America. And by the way, when did you cut your hair? Because a lot of rockers refuse to cut their hair. They get to our age, your age, and they're still dropping it back down their shoulder blades.
Yeah. Well, okay. So a couple of questions there. So Shawn, the first one is that when I was in high school and I started to get a lot of injuries, and I was only 5'8" and only about 130 30 pounds, 35 pounds, soaking wet.
Kinda like
So
Marc.
it was like the idea of becoming a professional athlete or even just a collegiate level athlete, that wasn't really going to be in the cards. And so then I got myself a Fender Telecaster and a little amp, and a friend of mine got me into some polka band gigs and Jewish wedding and bar mitzvah stuff. And I got my union card, and I started to become a musician. And that was the beginning of working. I was still in high school, and then I had always in basement rock bands and stuff. And then slowly but surely, I eventually got a gig with a guy named Justin Page, who had a record deal with Capitol Records here in Canada. And I toured with him and played in his band. And then I was playing in my own sort of progressive little band at a bar in West End, Toronto. And the two guys, Mike and Gil from Triumph, they came and saw me there and said, "Hey, I think this is our guy." And so they pitched me, and I was very unhappy about having to leave my friends in this, very kind of progressive band that I was in order to go to this Triumph thing that these guys had envisioned. But it was clearly going to be a move up in life. And I mean, honestly, the biggest motivator was that my girlfriend and I wanted to move out and live together. And so Triumph was offering me kind of a starting salary of $175 a week, which whether we played gigs or not. And I went, well, that will allow me to, fulfill this other thing, which was more of a core value thing to me anyways. So that's how it started. And yes, it's weird how it happens fast. Your question about, headlining and playing arenas and stuff. It did happen relatively quickly. It was only about 3 or 4 years before that happened. But that was kind of part of the Triumph thing, was that it was always going to sort of declare itself way above its own head. And people bought into it. The industry bought into it. The public bought into it. And it just kind of, it was like a roller coaster ride that was crazy and surreal. And yeah. Now, as the hair goes, if I let it grow out, it just looks kind of stringy and bad. Like it had a lot of body when I was, in my 20s and in my 30s and even in my 40s. But then, and I did go through some anxiety things in my life where I started to have alopecia areata, where you get these bald spots. And so then I was learning about comb overs and artful hairstyling and, all of that. Because in the old days, I didn't really have to worry. It grew out. It was good looking head of hair, So, of course, here's the thing. You remember MTV? It started out, early 80s. But by about 84, 85, it was all about hair production. Everybody was having to do the thing with it had to start looking big. And
Yeah, the big hair bands, right?
Videos with, all this hairspray and shit. And so, I was never all that keen on that necessarily, but
speaking of surreal, you were talking about how it hit. I was one of those young guys in high school driving around Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area with your cassette tapes in my little 1977 Honda Accord, jamming to.
Did you have long hair?
Lay it on the line and eventually fight the good fight. I did. My hair was more like Rick Ocasek's back then. It was kind of medium. But no, it's and then here you are, and we're doing a podcast 40 years later. It's
Rick. It's something. It's really interesting though. You said Triumph started really fast, but the end seemed to take a while. Was it? And I don't know how. I don't know the ins and outs and exactly what it was. You are straight up musician. They were good musicians too, but theatrical businessmen. Was it oil and water? Was it the label change? What started the slow decline for the breakup of Triumph?
All of those things and a lot more, and there's certain things, again, that thing about how much do you want to necessarily go into details that are eventually going to make the average people yawn and go, yeah, don't really care about, all of these terrible things that happened to you, Rick, and the bottom line and blah, 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 So you kind of go, okay, well, I'll try to figure out ways to, and it's not like I want to romanticize anything by leaving out the bad and just having, the good. But, when a band starts, especially in Triumph's case, we had a kind of an ethic that was Three Musketeers. All for one for all. Everything's getting split three ways. This is all going to be good. And it's an easy thing to do when you don't really have a pot to piss in. But then as, success happens, and there's money, and there's now power dynamics that exist, because each guy has a role, but some guys' roles are a little bit more important than other guys when it comes to, their dad was kind of the bookkeeper, and one guy was kind of the general manager, and really everything kind of had to cross his desk. And I'm going, well, I don't necessarily want everything to cross his desk. And it was getting to the point where, like, one of the things that happened in my life that didn't happen in the other guy's life was that Guitar Player magazine had approached me and said, hey, you seem to be an articulate guy, and, you've been a subscriber to our magazine forever. How would you like to be a guy that writes a column in the magazine? And I went, oh, what an honor, what an incredible thing. But they said, well, we want you to write a Back to Basics column, so it's going to be kind of like kindergarten, grade 1 kind of entry-level kind of stuff. And I was going, ooh, I don't know if I can turn that, and I don't know if I like the idea of what that might do to my image and stuff in a public way, but I don't care. To be in the pages of that magazine, that's all. But when I went to the Triumph guys, they said, yeah, well, whatever you get paid, right? That just comes into the kitty.
Bullshit.
Yeah, well, but that sort of shows you where the rub of Three Musketeers starts to rub against, well, hang on, I'm becoming a big boy now, and I have my own life, and I have my own ambitions, and of course, record companies are going, have you ever thought about a solo record? Because a dynamic was starting to occur where, we're sitting here and you guys are talking about Lay It on the Line and Fight the Good Fight, and, we could be talking about Magic Power and Hold On, and all of these songs were songs that I wrote. They were the ones that became the evergreen kind of tunes for the band, not the tunes that the other guys were involved in, really. As I tried to make that happen, that's not the way it played out publicly. That's not the way the public accepted the band. It's not the way it played out at radio. So that was something that created a wedge, a burr under the saddle, a pea under the mattress. Like, all of those kinds of things were like, and they accumulate, So then you're having an argument about, how to arrange a song on a record, and you realize, well, hang on, there's a bunch of kerosene here that it's coming from something else. This is not about what we're talking about. This fight is clearly about something else. So, yeah, the Beatles were the most successful band in the history of rock music, and they really lasted only about a decade. Triumph made it for 13 years with me in it, so it was like, that was a pretty good run. There's very few bands that are like the Rolling Stones. Most bands, they get a couple of kicks at the can and, 5 or 6 years, and it's, somebody's going to leave. Somebody's got a drug problem, et cetera, et cetera.
A lot of this is explored in a documentary that came out a year or so ago called Rock and Roll Machine. And when you watch it, you realize Triumph really was a machine. It was built to do what it did. There was a lot of Gil and Mike were very into the business side of it. They realized that they had to put on a dynamic show, so they invested a lot in pyrotechnics. And I think if the documentary is accurate, even when you guys were playing high schools, you were rolling up in a semi-trailer with a hell of a production team. So it was one of these things where somebody had a plan and executed it, and then it kind of, I think, became maybe a self-perpetuating machine when maybe it needed a little more human touch in there. And if you read Rick's book, which I highly encourage you to do, he talks about the first album, he wrote the songs, he had the publishing rights, but then he said, you know what, this is a team, so we're divvy them up 3 ways. Now, if you know anything about music, and I don't know that much, I know enough that publishing rights is where the real money comes in. And so if you're giving a piece of that action away, that's quite a gift to be giving away. And with 3 guys, 2 of whom are kind of business oriented and 1 guy who's more creative, you're coming into a 2-to-1 vote on almost every issue, which at some point is going to really get to you. There are a couple of things in Rock and Roll Machine that I wanted to point out, and I don't want to keep Rik here all day because he's a busy man, but Rik lost 2 brothers to cancer, and there's a guy in the documentary who's a big Triumph fan who was basically staring into the abyss, thought he was going to die of cancer, and I think anybody who knew what his case was all about felt the same way. And he wrote to Rik, which I'm sure a lot of people do, and Rik wrote him back a really thoughtful letter that was very inspiring. And that was a part of the documentary where I actually choked up, because I think that really was something you didn't need to do. And you didn't just say something like, rock on, kick cancer's ass, triumph forever. It was a thoughtful thing that I think may have made a difference in this person's battle. How often do you find yourself doing things like that, where somebody turns to you and says, you mean a lot to me. What can you tell me about what I'm dealing with?
Well, obviously, when I was out on the road, it was an almost daily occurrence. And certainly in a world that sort of converted from, you show up to the gig, you go in the back door, you come out of the dressing room, you play on the stage, you go back to the dressing room, you go out the back door, you go back to your hotel. But the world changed, and it became all about meet and greets. And, you're interacting now, and that's how, they're adding value to the concert ticket and stuff. So it was in my life all the time. But it was also something that I pursued and consciously wanted to have it be. I'll tell you a little anecdote to illustrate this. When Triumph was being successful, 1979, 1980, my wife and I used to go every summer for a little holiday to a place where we went for our honeymoon. And it was up on a lake in northern Ontario. And before I would go to the girls that work in the office, and I would say, from the fan mail, give me a pile of the really good ones. Give me 50, 75 letters. And I would go away on my holiday, and I would sit down and I would handwrite letters on my stationery and answer all of those letters. And the other guys in the band at one point said, "Are you out of your mind? What are you doing?" And I went, "I think I'm doing something that's going to matter for the rest of everybody's lives." And they went, "Oh, you're nuts." But again, I think it comes back to this thing of seeing music as a kind of a spiritual thing. It has a value that it remains in people's lives. The music that you guys listened to when you were teenagers, it stays with you. It's in your DNA now. It's in the way your brain functions, and they're just starting to understand on much deeper levels this idea of brain therapy, of music as brain therapy for people with autism and people with Alzheimer's, and so I always felt that in sort of in an intuitive way. And I thought, no, the music has to sort of offer something. And your point, Emma, was a good one. That thing of the band needing a more human kind of value to it. And I think the artists that last, the artists that become really, really huge, and I'm thinking now in my mind of Madonna and David Bowie and those kinds of, Bruce Springsteen. They become iconic kinds of folks that they survive through many cycles of the industry turning itself over. And how is that? Why is that? And it's because they do keep finding their way to reinventions of, I'm going to offer you something that money can't buy. This is going to be larger than life, and this is going to be amazing, and this is going to speak on levels of passion and levels of human spirituality. And so, in my own humble, modest way, I was taking a crack at that.
Well, you write, the good book says it's better to give than to receive. I do my best to do my part. I'd say that's Exhibit A right there, responding to fans. One last thing on the documentary I referenced at the top of the show, John Five, as one of the musicians who says he was greatly influenced by Triumph. John Five got his start in a high school band playing with my brother in the basement, and they were playing Blizzard of Oz. They called themselves. They played all the Priest, all the Ozzy stuff, and I still remember one of their lead singer, who was a very talented guitar player and trombone player, trying to do Bryan Adams' Summer of '69, and every time he hit that, it's a summer of '60, his voice would crack, and it would over and over and over again. I was like, oh my God. Well, back then, John Five, who was John Lowry, was the preppiest kid you ever saw. Pink polo shirts, Oxfords. He looked like he came out of some sort of Ralph Lauren ad, and you see him now, and I
think he's with Motley Crue now, isn't he? Didn't he replace Mick?
Yeah. He's touring with them, yeah.
So our paths have crossed very strangely over the years. But
sing, Mike. Come on.
I just did. That's as close I get.
No, will you sing for Rick like you did on the show a few years ago?
The only place I sing in is church because they're too polite to tell me. Last time I sang Triumph. I almost got canned.
Yeah. Rick, I got to ask you before we go, and I don't know if this is a trite question or if you get annoyed at the comparison with Rush. I mean, same, not just Canadian bands, same area, loud three pieces, guitar driven, deep lyrics. And I know you're friends with Alex now, but was there a competition between anybody in the band, or was it kind of, hey, we can, rising tide raises all boats kind of thing?
There was never any competition or any bad spirit at all. And I can remember before I was in Triumph seeing Rush at the Gasworks in Toronto, a bar on Yonge Street, and Geddy had his nails painted black, at the time. And Alex was playing on a 335, and I didn't meet them then. But the first time Triumph played the Gasworks, Alex came. He was there, and he bought me a beer. We stood at the bar together, and the thing about it was that Rush was always a level up, as Triumph was growing, Rush was kind of exploding as an international, global kind of. They were in Canada. Rush was the way that Led Zeppelin was to the world, or Pink Floyd was to the world. So we weren't even in that league, and I always saw it as Triumph was kind of riding on Rush's coattails, and I would say as much, in interviews and stuff, because they were like. Triumph had become successful and big, but we were not in that same league. And we were a very different kind of a band in any case. They were fast becoming this progressive kind of thing. You mentioned earlier that they weren't that metal. They had a little metal in them. They had that Led Zeppelin kind of metal, which Triumph did too. And of course, Geddy sang high and I sang high. Yeah, okay. But my singing wasn't. In the early stages, it kind of was. It had a little bit of Geddy in it, but I was much more of a sort of a John Anderson of Yes kind of singer, or a Robert Plant of Zeppelin kind of a singer. Now, Zeppelin was really the band that Triumph modeled itself after, not Rush, And we used to play Led Zeppelin sets in bars, and we had medleys where we would play. And we would do some Hendrix, and we would do some Deep Purple. Deep Purple was a very big band for me in a formative kind of way. And when Triumph was starting and was in that sort of metal period, Rock and Roll Machine, that kind of stuff, I was saying, no, you got to look back to Purple. You got to have that Deep Purple kind of roots in what we're doing. And Rush didn't really have much of that. They had a little bit of Working Man in the early stages, but not once they got rolling, and certainly not once when they got Neil in the band. Yep. Once that happened, it became more of a kind of there was a lot more esoteric kind of stuff going on. I have a question for you. ML. What does ML stand for?
Michael Lewis.
Oh, okay. That's good.
He didn't get that from a typo either. A typo on the album, like R.I.K. did.
Yeah.
It's a good story. Yeah.
But I have kind of the same thing. Once I became ML, it kind of stuck, so I stuck with it. I didn't switch back to Michael, and I always thought M. Lewis was a little too pretentious.
Yeah. So was that branded by your family or your friends, or did you choose that?
No, just when I started writing in college, I used it because it was a little different. The guys I used to write these. I used to cover the police department in college, and the guy who did it before me he had a Middle Eastern name. It was Saeed Deep, and you'd have your name at the bottom of what you wrote, but his name was spelled S-A-I-D Deep, so it looked like the police were actually saying something in a deep voice, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And then I met him, and I said, oh, it's Saeed, okay. And then the guy who replaced him was Arthur Bridgeforth Jr., which had this beautiful melodic name, and I'm like, I'm Mike Elrick. I said, well, what am I going to do? I figured I'd just go with ML, and I wrote him in a way that was a little offbeat, and people kind of liked him. I thought, well, if this is what people are digging, I'll stick with it. So now I've been ML longer than I haven't been, but
your friends call you Mike, though.
They call me all kinds of things
for the most part. Right?
But we have a guest here, so I want to keep it sophisticated.
Kind of like Magic gets called Irvin by his people.
Well, the M used to stand for Magic, but that's more of our PG-13 show, so we're going to save that for another time.
Yeah.
But Rik, really great catching up with you. We could keep you here all day, which I think you probably have better things to do. I want to leave you with one thing Rik wrote in the book that I think is one of many things worth taking with you. I try not to give regret much time and energy because it's counterproductive. Yes, one uses experiences of sadness and regret to shape one's choices for today and tomorrow, but wishing that reality had been different never held much fascination for me. An interesting observation for someone who writes a memoir, but if you get into it, you'll find out why he wrote it. And it's a great read. Lay it on the line, a backstage pass to rock star adventure, conflict, and triumph. Rik, where can people get this book?
Well, I mean, obviously, the small press publishers like to, they give you a script and say, make sure you push folks towards independent booksellers in their neighborhoods because, we don't want to see all of those shops die. But of course, you can go on Amazon and you can order. You could have done that before the book even came out, So we live in a digital universe and there's no getting around that. There's an audiobook that's coming. And I can't remember the publisher of that, and they said, Rik, would you want to have an actor, read your words? And I go, yeah, that'd be good. Cause I wrote a poetry book and I did my own audiobook and it's hard work. And I went, I think I'd like to avoid that hard work. So they're going to get a professional to do it. I go, but yeah, great. Oh, and there's an advance. Oh, great. So that's coming. But the book itself, it's ECW Press. So if they've got a website, you can order it there. But you can go to Amazon, you can order it there. In Canada, they have Indigo chapters. What's the big chain in the States? What do they call it?
Well, it used to be Barnes & Noble, but they're still around.
It's Amazon.
Yeah, it's Amazon.
Who are we kidding?
Yeah. It's the way of the universe, which that's a kind of a weird thing, because, of course, if you write a book, you're going... like 16th and 17th century authors, I'm writing a book. You go, okay, don't put on too many airs. And now, who wants the book? People go, I think I want it for my Kindle. Can't I just get it so I can listen to it in my earbuds when I'm walking? So it's a different world now.
Well, I read it. I read the PDF on my phone, and I'll tell you, I will be ordering the hard copy. And if you're looking to support a new independent bookseller, Next Chapter Books on East Warren in Detroit just opened. They'll find a book for you anywhere. I used to work there when it was a paint store when I listened to Triumph and it was on the radio. So do support your local bookstores. Support Rik Emmett. He's got an important message out there. And Rik, great having you here. You're welcome anytime. Just let us know.
Thanks, gentlemen. I really did enjoy this. Great questions and a nice chat. And I look forward to doing it again.
Well, Rik, we never asked for much. The truth will do just fine.
There it is.
I'm going to
Thanks,
get my
Rick.
severance now. That's it for me.
Thanks, Rick.
Hoisted on his own petard. There we go.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, gents.
I can't do it. I'm terrible, but he's still great, man. Rik Emmett of Triumph and solo work, and a professor. I mean, this guy, his career after the band is just as impressive as his career with the band. He's really a Renaissance man, and you will not read a rock memoir like this. It's really, to me, it's almost more like a journal. He really gets into a lot of things that if you're a family man, if you're someone trying to find your way in life, there's a lot to think about here, and it's good stuff. And like a lot of these books, it's a quick read. You know, you can spend a day and really come away feeling a lot richer for it. So
Hey, and if you want to be a lot richer, how's that for a segue?
yeah, it's
Right? You got to maybe invest.
Let's get right to the commerce.
Getting your investments going. Why don't you give Luke Nowacki a call? He'll give you a free consultation to help you figure out, well, what do I do with all this money that I made being a rock star? How am I going to help it grow? What are my goals as I get older? Give Luke a call, 248-663-4748. Once again, free consultation. Find out if you are on target to meet your goals.
Because when you call Luke, he'll make it all about you, sweetheart.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through
Mosaic Wealth.
Inc. Member FINRA-SIPC.
Mosaic Wealth.
Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent.
Mosaic Wealth.
Inc.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
Summer's over, but with the Michigan Peddler, Detroit's top-rated party bike, the fall fun has just begun. You can get up to 15 friends and family on a bike for a fun Friday night on the town, Saturday afternoon. You know, soak up some fall sun. Get that last gasp of those receding rays. Or maybe you do a roving tailgate before a Sunday Lions game. It's the perfect way to get people socializing and off their damn phone. Get on a pedal bike. The Michigan Peddler will take you to Detroit's landmarks where you can take the kind of shots, the selfies, the ussies, if you're a Ted Lasso fan, that will make you the envy of everyone on Instagram. Small groups are no problem. The Mini Peddler is perfect for members of the Shawn Windsor Fan Club because it accommodates groups of 6 or less. If Triumph does a reunion tour on a pedal pub, 3 of them, they'll be fine. They don't even need roadies. They can get on that mini bike. It might happen. Rides start in Corktown, so you don't have to worry about traffic or paying parking. You can go to Corktown, Midtown, Campus Martius, the stadiums downtown, wherever you want to go. You can create your own pub crawl. Now, Michigan Peddler sponsors us because they're hoping we're going to help their business. And so we're offering a special incentive. If you book a ride on the Michigan Peddler and use promo code SOUL, we will send you some exclusive ML Soul of Detroit branded gear. You can only get that by using promo code SOUL. And if you don't use promo code SOUL, then they won't sponsor us anymore. So that doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for them. So get your ass out there on a pedal pub. If you book it on your birthday, the birthday boy or whoever books the trip will get some gear from Michigan Peddler. For more information or to book your ride, you can call Michigan Peddler at 313-744-3272 or visit MichiganPeddler.com. That's Michigan, PEDALER.com.
And they are not our Geek of the Week. They just bring us the Geek of the Week.
No, Geek of the Week's going to be really short, and I'm glad Sean's not here because he'll get mad. But it's Calvin Johnson.
What?
Did you hear? No, I watched.
I must not have. Why is Calvin Johnson?
I watched the Lions, some of the game on Sunday.
You did?
I did watch some.
Oh my goodness!
Because I had a hockey game, an early hockey
those
game,
Lions?
So I really couldn't do anything else. So I sat down and had a sandwich and watched the Lions. Yeah, great performance. You know, very fun to watch. David Montgomery, great free agent signing. I thought everybody else was getting hurt. He's just battering. I mean, I thought they kept going. Okay, Montgomery up the middle. I'm thinking, you're running out of running backs. Don't kill this guy. Great show. But I heard something that just drove me crazy. Like, I've always been down on Calvin Johnson because he quit and he expected to get all the money that he negotiated when he didn't tell him I'm going to quit. So I've never felt much sympathy for him there. But the announcer said that before the game, maybe the night before the game, Calvin Johnson went in the locker room and told the team, keep your spirits up, don't worry about it. It was the Carolina locker room. Did you guys hear that?
Shawn, did you know that?
No, sorry. Drew wanted to talk upstairs, so I figured that was more important.
Did you know Calvin Johnson talked to the Carolina locker room?
No. So what?
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that's what they said.
How do you know he didn't talk to the Lions locker room?
Who gives a shit? They're playing Carolina. You don't go in the other locker room unless you want to, piss in their Ben Gay or something. I don't know what the hell he's doing trying to get the Carolina team up before they're playing his team that he abandoned.
I thought it was after.
And then had a fit of pique.
Are we sure he did this? And if it's after the game, what's the big deal?
No, they said it during. I mean, I heard the announcers say this while I was watching the game. It was happening. This was.
All I know is he hung out with Devin Booker, who was rocking a Miguel Cabrera jersey. Yeah, on the sideline before the game.
And it was Calvin Johnson, my Geek of the Week.
Who was? Wait, Calvin Johnson was your Geek of the Week?
Yeah,
for being a traitor.
I disagree.
Privileged traitor.
Yeah, sorry. Drew wanted to talk about something that's clearly going to be part of your show later.
What?
There's some of the Mel Tucker coverage. And, yeah. Some reporters who were involved and some back and forth and that sort of thing. By the way,
Mel and I were talking about that in the pre-show that you were not here for.
Can we? You know what? It's hard to get here. I don't
ask from us. Just try to be on time.
I can't do it. I cannot do it. This 11 o'clock is tough. I just can't do it. I got to get my wife to work at a certain point, and there's this stuff. I can't do it. Anyway, fight the good fight. Can we play that in room 7609 instead
Let's find out.
Whatever.
Your answer is no.
Damn it.
7609. And you can dance together all night if you've got the time.
As you know, we're always looking for great suggestions for new wave acts that you love that had a hit that never really became a hit. Me and people who are here on time. And others. And sometimes there's a band
When's he ever on time, Mark?
Well, I mean, he was earlier than usual today.
Usual, okay. Usual's the key word. He did
Are you
say
guys done fighting?
He did say what ML was about, so I guess that helps.
Dragging it out. Well, so we like suggestions. In Rik Emmett's book, he says some of the music he likes to listen to the most includes Tears for Fears. And this, well, it's a very different kind of tune for someone who's a rocker. But it is a very beautiful, a very thoughtful, a very deep song called Woman in Chains.
Many stones. Many stones. Well, I feel deep in your heart now. It's time can't heal it. And I feel somebody somewhere is trying to breathe. We know what I mean. It's a world gone crazy. It's woman in chains. It's under my skin, but out of my hands. I tear it apart, but I won't understand. Will not accept the greatness of man. Woman in chains.
One crazy woman in chains.
Everybody still awake?
Oh, come on. You know,
I should have stayed upstairs talking to Drew.
Marty, what happened?
if you know anything about Roland's story, he had a very difficult upbringing, and I think
good.
was
I'm sorry for him.
A very reflective
And
person.
so he's taking it out on us.
Now you sound like Morrissey criticizing We Are the World. Did you ever hear what he said about that?
No, but he was probably right.
He said, I'm really sorry for all the suffering in Africa, but why should we be inflicted to more suffering because of it with this song?
That's right.
But,
No, it's an awful song.
But no, this is a nice song. It's something that you I don't think you think about when you think of Tears for Fears.
Have a Krispy Kreme.
I don't ask for much, and I don't ask for Krispy Kreme because I have a cholesterol issue. But thank you.
A buzzkill.
Some granola will do just fine. But
it's been baked in maple syrup and brown sugar.
As my high cholesterol toes the HDL line, I don't know anything about cholesterol. I just know I got too much of the bad, not enough of the good. So that's room 7609, where we invite you to suggest new wave tunes that maybe you love, but other people haven't heard. Or
you know what the worst part of that
doesn't
song
really
was?
matter. Sean's going to hate them, but we love them. So please keep them coming to
Who's
ML
we?
Soul
Mark doesn't love
Detroit.
'em.
I didn't like that song one bit. And the worst part was that it was 6.5 minutes.
Well,
it was nice to catch up though, because I didn't get to catch up with the pre-show.
You didn't hear the
So that was nice.
The extended version. There's a 12-minute version out there.
Oh, I'm sure that's lovely.
But Tears for Fears also big in the 80s and still on the road. They were just here last year. Unfortunately, I missed them. I had a conflict. But please send us your suggestions for room 67609. We do have another new wave music theme suggested that we will try and get to next week. I have one more up my sleeve from the Bangles. I don't know if anybody wants to
The
guess
Missing
which one it
Persons?
is.
Oh, is it going to be from? Are we still doing from movies?
I'd like to. If
What
we
about
have some
Missing
more
Persons?
suggestions.
I
just listened to them this weekend.
Hazy Shade of the Winter.
Ah!
Oh, sorry, spoiled.
From what movie? From what movie?
Less Than Zero.
Oh, damn.
That
yeah.
is great movie, great song.
Yeah, it's
Well, I'll tell you what. If
I'm
you
sure
ever
that movie's
wondered,
awful if you watch it again.
if you ever wondered whether it was glamorous to do drugs, watch Less Than Zero.
Or Train Spotting.
Train Spotting for
Which
sure.
I'm sure holds up much
I
better.
remember when I was younger watching Train Spotting. Going, yeah, I don't think I would ever want to inject heroin.
Yeah, no, there was very little to.
I love that movie so
to
much.
inspire you.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
I
Less
watch it
Than
at least
Zero,
once
maybe
a
not
year.
so much.
In Train Spotting, except for I loved any scene with Begbie.
It's a great movie.
Begbie. I love it when
And Ewan McGregor's Sean Connery impersonation is fantastic.
When Begbie starts the fight by putting his knife in the table and throwing the beer.
Oh yeah,
What an asshole.
and then the game was made. Yeah, and when they contrast what was really happening
Yes.
that night, it's like he found this little guy and kicked his ass, and it was
Such a good movie. Have you seen Train Spotting 2? Because I think
I
it's
have
pretty
not.
good.
Oh,
I know people rag on it, but I think it works well with the original.
Train Spotting 2. There's some things where I just want it to be that. Like Beetlejuice 2 is coming out. What is
it is?
Yeah, Michael Keaton is.
Love Beetlejuice.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't know how that's going. Jeffrey Jones, of course, will not be making an
I
appearance.
love Beetlejuice on the stage, so I can go grope like Bobert. Wasn't that what she was seeing? Wasn't she seeing Beetlejuice?
Is that what she was seeing? Really?
Yes.
Yeah, live on stage when they were groping.
Yeah.
How romantic.
So what if you say Matt Gates 3 times? Do we get a new Speaker
You
of
get
the House?
Beetlejuice?
Is that what happens?
Yeah, there you go.
Jim Jordan.
Speaking of people who should be investigated, okay, Jim Jordan's a whole thing. There's some of the testimony of wrestlers who say what he knew and didn't know. I mean, we've talked on this show
at Ohio State, yeah.
about Larry Nassar, about Dr. Anderson, the wrestling coach at Ohio State, and Jim Jordan was an assistant coach, ignoring all these complaints about the team doctor doing some Dr. Anderson type stuff to these young men. And there are wrestlers who said Jim Jordan knew about it. This guy wants to investigate everything in the world except what went on with the Ohio State wrestling program. But let's save that. Let's save that for another time. We'll see where that plays out in Washington. No donors to thank this week, sadly. If you would like to support us, we really would appreciate it. You can support us by supporting our sponsors, Luke Nowacki, Pinnacle Wealth Strategies, Caju Cafe, of course. Lots of great stuff going on there. The kitchen is open late. The full menu is available until midnight, Monday through Saturday, and until 10 p.m. on Sunday. That's just about later than anybody on the east side. Lots of great live music there. Unfortunately, Rik has retired from touring. Otherwise, we would step in as his promoters and try and get him to play the Caju. Maybe you could do a 2-night thing. He could slide over to Harpo's. I don't know if he ever played. He probably didn't play the IROC, but that's another metal bar on the east side. But lots of great stuff. Let's see what's going on at the karaoke on Wednesday. Tonight, it's Tuesday, Thousand Fuel CD release. Regal and The Problem will also be there, so that's at the Caju. Karaoke Wednesday, Thursday, just come and enjoy the food and the feather bowling. Friday, Laura Rain and Caesars. Saturday, Jim McCarthy and Mystery Train. Sunday, Lemon Swans, Blonde Liars, Neon Display. And on Monday, Evan Perry and Friends Open Jam. That's the Blues Jam on Monday. And Muscle Madness, all you can eat mussels. The weather's still good, so make sure you get out there and enjoy the band pavilion. New good music inside, outside, and of course, the garage bar. Big week in Michigan State news. Amy writes in, "Hey, if you need any additional content for today's podcast, this is super interesting. Maybe something the MSU J School instructor and sports columnist Windsor can chat about. Last week, when Mel Tucker's legal team leaks text they lifted from the dead woman's phone, Brenda's Tracy's assistant who died in a car accident over the summer, a young female sports director at the Lansing CBS affiliate went on a bizarre social media crusade to smear Tucker's alleged victim, Ms. Tracy, and defend Mr. Tucker. It legit seemed like someone was coaching her what to tweet. Her name? Audrey Dahlgren. Kenny Jacoby, the USA Today reporter you had on as a guest a couple weeks ago, even publicly quoted Ms. Dahlgren, calling her out for being unprofessional. After her bizarre Mel Tucker spam, she is no longer on the LNS website and her socials have been removed LNS sports director. Okay, I guess that's not what her handle is on social media. Presumably fired? I don't know how someone young, pretty, and talented hitches their wagon to that bozo unless there's a quid pro quo of some kind. So she just blew up her career and credibility being a crisis PR flack while still employed as a professional journalist? Maybe you guys can talk about the ethics involved in situations like this and professional lines she seemed to cross. I'm sure you guys have a story of people you grew close professionally to trying to lean on you to print a certain spin. Well, we don't know that Mel Tucker had any influence or even communicated with Audrey Dahlgren about what she was posting, but I did see some of the posts.
She did correct the one post saying that it's Mel Tucker's legal team that is saying she is lying about her dating habits, which I think that whole thing is a red herring anyways as to what happened between them.
Well, she did try and provide some context, and of course on Twitter, where there's a limited number of characters, this is not the place for in-depth discussions.
Yep.
I've heard that she hosted a show, a Spartan football show with Coach Tucker. I don't know if that's true or not, so she may have had some affiliation there. But certainly as the hometown station, you spend more time and get to know the coaches more than other folks. But you know, I haven't followed too much of what she was posting other than she and Kenny did seem to get into it, and Kenny did kind of bring her up short and just say, these are odd things to be saying for a journalist. I don't know. Shawn, have you covered people? I mean, I know people you've covered have been in trouble before, and I know people you have some admiration for. Coach Izzo was taking a lot of heat when ESPN was going after Michigan State. We've seen Juwan Howard take a lot of heat, and I think you have some affection or some affinity for Coach Howard.
I don't know about affection or
some admiration.
Affinity.
Let's say admiration.
I mean,
right?
I respect both
you
those guys as
him. Let's
coaches.
say respect. Let's not make it more than it is.
They're
but
both
respect.
good coaches. They're not the same sentence, maybe. But they're both good coaches.
But when you see them taking a lot of heat, and it seems like they're on the heavy end of the scale, have you ever felt compelled to say, "Now
No,
wait a minute"?
I have not.
Or
I have not.
Okay, how come?
That's to me that's mostly social media, and I just don't partake in that. And it's not my job to defend somebody like that. If I'm writing a column and it's something that's newsworthy and something's happened and I have to weigh in on it, then sure. But I'm not just going to go to Twitter and start, attacking somebody or defending somebody. It's just not what I do.
I think the rare times when I've done something like that is when I may have posted something where people are talking the Manoogian Mansion party, and I'll say, Kilpatrick did almost every other thing he's been accused of, but there was no party. And so if I weigh in on something like that, it's only on a subject that I've spent some time investigating, have come to some conclusions, and want to try and keep the conversation focused on more factual matters. But it did seem like she waded into something and took a lot of heat from people who feel that Mel Tucker's legal team was being unfair to Ms. Tracy. But I also think she's a fairly young reporter in a fairly small market, and you kind of learn things like this in smaller markets. This is where you
tone.
Cut your teeth.
It's not just that. Sometimes it's the tone, but it's also just how you're gonna. The word choice is really important. How you're gonna modify it. If you say something and you don't say it's alleged or believed to be or whatever, this is the charge, this is the accusation, and you present it as fact, and that and that's kind of what happened. And I think that's why she probably had to amend it. Right. I mean, that's really all it is. I knew, because I know her a little bit, I knew she wasn't trying to say this is fact. I knew she was just forgot a word.
Saying where it was coming from.
Yeah. Had forgotten a couple of words. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about social media. You if you're a journalist, it's easy to think, okay, I'm just having a conversation. And you're not as formal in the way you present things.
Really,
and it can get away from you.
I'm just it's amazing to me in general the public and how we receive these things, right? And whatever side is presented, that's what we go with. And then the other side, this will be presented, and then that's fact. It's for instance, the $5 left in her account, right? That was presented as fact. She was down to $5. Well, it comes from a text to her friend and coworker. I tell my friends all the time I'm broke. It doesn't mean I'm broke, right? Is that factual? Is it factual? I mean, they put it in. His lawyer puts it in the letter. I don't know. To me, it's a red herring. I've told you before, I had a lot of questions about Brenda Tracy and her actions. But that being said, that's not what he was fired for.
No, it's not. And by the way, when you say broke, you say I'm broke, you probably are. Maybe there's something you want you can't afford, or you're behind on something, or something's going on. I mean,
to my last $5 or whatever.
But then you would say that.
The accusations from her.
But you would say that. You feel broke, and that's real, and so that's the truth, right?
Well, I'm just saying it could be a figure of speech, or being down to your last $5 could be a figure of speech.
It could. It could.
Do I think he sexually harassed her? That is such a tricky question, and frankly, I don't think it matters. I don't think that's what he was fired for. I think he was fired for.
Well, no, it matters to her. I mean, you shouldn't say.
Sure, but this isn't a criminal case.
You're talking about
this isn't a civil case or a criminal case.
It may not matter to Michigan State in terms of why they fired him, but of course it matters. It matters to her.
But she's not suing him.
If he did, it matters to her. Right?
She's not having him. She's not pressing charges. I mean, it's very different from Trevor Bauer.
It is,
and I think people lose sight of that.
Well, I think the reason why Mel Tucker was fired was very narrow. The morals clause, and if you are having an intimate relationship with someone who's not your wife, and you're telling people things that aren't true, that's immoral. And we can say, oh, that's outdated. That's, this isn't the 17th century and all that other crap. Well, that is immoral, and there's a morals contract clause in your contract.
But isn't that why you have hearings, right? To kind of parse who's telling the truth and who's not. And if he's lying about it, then yeah, he's probably not telling the truth.
Right. And then
he's probably
also
doing something immoral.
The other reason they said they fired him was because he he brought shame to the university, or put it in a bad light. And I don't think
that's the reason.
I don't think there's any arguing that Michigan State and Michigan State football are not seen in the same light, or as favorable a light. Not that we get very much favorable light these days, as we were before this became public. So I think their basis for firing him is going to stand
strong,
up pretty well. And I am looking at WLNS right now. Audrey does host the coaches show, so maybe she knew Mel and had some.
I'm sure she did.
Some feeling, but
bias there.
Or maybe she just said, "Hey, you know what? I can increase my following by getting in the middle of this." I mean, she is a sports reporter in Lansing. She should be someone people look to for her take on what's going on. Perhaps she was just not as artful as she should have been, but holy smokes, is she taking on a lot of heat?
I hope she didn't get fired, right? I mean, I don't know. Is that fireable, what she did? In your opinion?
You know what?
I don't know. It depends on who you're working for.
There are
behind
people,
the scenes, I guess.
There are people getting crucified all the time for what seemed to me to be correctable actions. And I think in TV, it's easy to get rid of people because there's a line out the door of people who are probably just as good, just as hungry, and maybe even willing to work cheaper.
She has updated her LinkedIn, by the way.
Oh, what does it say?
Well, she just has an end date for being sports director at LNS.
Well, I don't see her on their homepage.
October 2023.
I see Ian Kress, weekend sports anchor. I see Haley Schoengart.
Wait, what are we saying?
6 sports reporter. It looks like she's no longer with LNS. I think
if that's her choice or if that's their choice, I don't think we know.
I think that's a shame. I think people should be allowed to make a mistake.
Yeah, I would say so.
If we all expected
this is the problem with Twitter
to get no forgiveness, who would ever admit their mistakes, by the way, if they knew that admitting your mistake was a death sentence?
How did she amend it? Did she just go back and say alleged or something?
I think well, let me go see if I can find it, but I think
my recollection is that I'm only presenting what their side is now saying, that she was trying to make it.
But she left the tweet up because she didn't want to change it, which I kind of respect that in a way. Because sometimes taking them down is even worse.
I remember seeing it thinking, yeah, if it were clear that this is what they're saying and not what I'm saying, then she would have been fine.
Exactly. Well, she did, though. She did correct that. She said, my tweet was misinterpreted. I went back and corrected the language. I'm not taking it down or deleting it specifically so people know there was no ill will or intention for defending one camp or the other. I don't have a problem with her correcting it.
You know,
wow, she does Big Ten Network games too,
Yeah,
right?
she's sideline reporter. Mhm.
This is a small station.
Is that still?
And I'll tell you, these reporters are not very well compensated. I suspect that if you went back and looked at their staff list, it rotates every year as people come out of Michigan State or come from a smaller market. So this is a place where you should have an opportunity to maybe stub your toe. It shouldn't be a place where there's a guillotine hanging all the time, and if someone loosens their grip on the rope, you lose your head.
I'll defend her too, because she was tweeting all this as it was coming out pretty quick, so you're prone to making more mistakes. She had another tweet too that said, "Let me clarify this tweet. Mel Tucker's legal team claims she is lying about her
Yes,
dating habits."
I think that's the one I saw where she attributes
This
it
doesn't
basically
change
to
the
them.
fact that he admitted to masturbating on a phone call with her. Then he had another one. I've posted our entire article, which is on our website, and added another tweet with it saying, "They claim." So, she made a mistake, I assume, by going too fast, which is the problem with Twitter.
Well, and you're also in a competitive news market, right? You try and get it up first, and sometimes you make mistakes. So
she's not on their homepage, Mike.
I didn't see.
I mean, I just looked. So here's what I would say. What happened with Brenda Tracy? We're going to find out more whether this was abusive, assaultive behavior. That's going to be determined. But enough people's careers have been ruined by what Mel Tucker did. Whatever it was, I'm hoping that this reporter isn't one of them. I'd never heard her name before, so I don't believe that she was some way out there wacko person who's saying crazy stuff. I don't know. But I do think that Mel Tucker's lawyer is very smart, and the way they're releasing this stuff, there are a lot of people who have questions about Brenda Tracy, and they are sort of dribbling out a little bit of fuel to keep that fire burning. And I'm curious to see everything that they have, because when you only provide a portion of a conversation, you may not have the full context. I guess the same thing could be said of the way Brenda Tracy's team has put things out. I just wish that everything that Mel Tucker's team had or has will be provided to the investigators so that they have the benefit of as complete a picture as possible, because I don't want to see Mel Tucker get, I'm going to use the word convicted, even though it's not a criminal proceeding, only on half the evidence. And I also don't want to see him go out there and say, well, if they knew everything I knew, I'd have been found innocent. Well, give them what you have.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was done being interviewed in January, and he kept pushing it down the road, right? Trying to get it canceled. Then they decided to make a date for the hearing, and he pushed it further back. I mean, those are his decisions. He could have gotten out in front of it. He didn't have to lie.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much more to know about this. Is there, though? Well, I mean, if his lawyer says we have all this exculpatory evidence, let's see it. Let's get that in a form where we can see it as soon as possible, or at least let the finder of fact see it. It feels like there's a lot of games being played right now.
Well, there absolutely is.
Certainly, Mel Tucker's
really about money.
Mel Tucker's availability doesn't seem to be an issue, although he has a
sick.
Medical condition, but we don't know what it is. Yeah. I mean, apparently it's not ED, but it would be good if someone could tell us a little bit more. I know I don't want to get in his private business, but
this apparently isn't his first time with the Family Medical Leave Act either.
Well, if somebody's telling me right now that Mel Tucker's having trouble being as effective a witness as he can be and being as much assistance to his defense as possible because he's extremely depressed, I have no trouble believing that. And I don't think anybody would fault him, because I would not want to be in his position. It just feels like he was under a lot of pressure before, and that's just been multiplied by 1,000. Doesn't excuse anything that happened, but I'm just saying, if he said, "Dude, I'm jacked up right now. I can't make it."
But I do hope Audrey,
Tell us.
I hope the reporter wasn't fired over those tweets. I mean, that's it's a little
harsh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Amy, based on what I know, and I don't know every detail of this, it seems like the punishment doesn't fit the crime, even if a crime has been committed by Audrey, and I don't really see, I don't know. We're and Obama has said this too. We can't sacrifice people based on a mistake they've made or dig deep into their past because they made one misstep and then ruin them. What kind of a society are we going to have? But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. As a journalism professor, I will just tell you this. I tell my students all the time, be careful what you post because somebody's going to find it. Especially if you cover politics and you're criticizing somebody's going to dig into your past and they're going to dig it up and they're going to try and use it to undercut you. And I'll tell you, I've been in positions where somebody's tried to say, oh, well, you said this or you did this. And so whatever you have to say now isn't relevant. It happens, and people with money and power will read and find every single thing you've done and try and twist it. So
what were you going to say? More periods and fewer conjunctions? Is that what you were saying, Mark?
I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to say.
How come you were looking at me like that?
I was waiting for him to rap so I could just fire.
I agree.
Since he mentioned him. Sorry. Anyway, what's going on? We done?
Amy did want the MSU J School instructor's perspective.
Whoa.
One more piece of feedback, and you can write to us at mlsoulofdetroit@gmail.com. We love to hear from you.
Your Wolverines are pretty good.
I think they're really good. My buddy and I were in an argument about it, though. So.
Yeah. No,
we'll know in 3 weeks when they actually play someone. I'm like, well, I mean, you can see.
You don't go.
You can see their depth. You can see the way they block. You can see how
52-10 even against a middling team on the road
there's a lot of things to like about them.
I'll tell you what I like. The Michigan State women's volleyball team beat the Wolverines, and so did the Michigan State's women's soccer team.
I had no idea.
You didn't?
No.
That's great, though.
I guess that makes you a chauvinist.
They're non-revenue sports.
Your Lions, by the way, were...
Mike watched the game.
We're not too bad.
Did you know that?
Considering they were missing some guys.
Did you know Elric watched the game?
Good for him. Of course he does. He always watches.
I watched some of it. To kill time before my game where we got creamed like I'm afraid my Spartan. I actually have extra tickets to the Spartans Wolverines game, and I'm thinking of making an offer to listeners that if they want to come and tailgate with us and go to the game, I will sell them some of these extra tickets, but I'm going to have to charge Wolverines twice as much just because I don't want any more blue in that stadium than we're going to have.
Give them away.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it can't be a promotional thing.
No. Just pass them out
to somebody.
Yeah, that's what I do. I
what a lovely.
I work
way
really
to
hard. I buy
Mark?
stuff. I just give it away.
No. 7:30 at night in East Lansing. No thank you.
I know it's brutal.
in October.
It's brutal.
No way.
I wish I had the Ravens game the next day.
No way, man.
Are you going to be there, Sean?
I will.
Okay.
Are you going to be there?
I will. I go all the time. In fact, I'm taking a road trip with the Spartans in November. So.
To where?
Indiana.
Oh.
I'm going to wander Indiana. But.
All right.
And if I didn't have one of my daughters in a show this weekend, I might consider going to Rutgers and spend a little weekend in New York City.
Yeah. No, it's fun. You'll like Bloomington.
But I've been to Bloomington. I really like it.
Go eat at Shapiro's in Indy on the way down.
Yeah.
The deli. All right. What are we looking for? Cyrus?
Yeah.
I was going to ask what's on the Carlson Shawn podcast, but I'm sure
Cyrus is on the Carlson Shawn podcast.
It's absolutely crackling with energy.
It is. Lions.
God damn.
Oh, you're talking about the Lions? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. You didn't mention the Michigan State women's soccer?
No, why wouldn't we want to talk about what people actually care about?
Yeah, they want people to listen to the show.
Yeah, no, why wouldn't we talk about what people are
just tradition?
super passionate about?
Sort of Carlson Shawn.
Okay. Yeah, no.
All right. Well, I think it's probably time for our friend Cyrus to lay it on the line and take.
Can you dig
us.
that? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Just a regular guy who grew up with the posters of these guys on my walls. And now I'm one of them.
He's a podcaster. No, the normal rules don't apply. How does it feel to know that everyone loves you? You're gonna be great, babe.
Perfect insanity, man.
Your job is to live the fantasy other people only dream about. Dream big, live the life.
ML Soul of Detroit.